Hello. So this is going to be a bit of a vlog type of video. I've had one of my custom orders in for a bridal bouquet, and I thought I'd take you along with me as I stitch it. This one is going to be a challenge. This is the photograph I've been sent. It's a gorgeous bouquet, but you can see, if I use my pen as a pointer, we've got lots of sort of blurred edges, so there's going to have to be a degree of artistic license there. We've got these types of flowers. I don't know flower names, I'll warn you now. Lots and lots of layered petals and lots of depth to that picture and lots of colour tones, so I'm hoping I can have enough variation in thread to carry that through. Further up, we've got some more sort of blurring of the images here, so I'm going to have to try and sort of, again, a bit of artistic license to define those. We've got a sort of blurred edge here, and then this big old flower, the stamen inside is kind of blurred, so again we're going to have to sort of kind of blend that out and make that look as realistic as possible. We're going to get rid of the hands. I'm assuming the red is part of a ribbon, but I think I'm going to ditch that part and we're going to just show the stems coming out underneath. Yeah, this is going to be a challenge. There's a lot of work in this one. So yeah, let's see how that goes. So first things first, I am printing the image out because then I have a reference from what I'm working with. And then the next step is charge up the good old iPad, because I haven't used this for a wee while. And then I can get on with preparing the stencil on Procreate. This is an 8-inch hoop, so it's the big one, thankfully. So I'm going to have a nice bit of space to work with. If you're trying to get this much detail in a teeny tiny little tiny hoop, you've no chance. It's not going to work. So we're going to see how this goes. The prep work in drawing the stencil and the outline and matching the colour palette is probably a weekend's work, because there's so much detail in these flowers. That's going to be a job in and of itself, so we'll see how that goes. Okay, so next I've got my iPad open. I'm going to open Procreate, and I'm going to add, I can't see what I'm doing here. No, I can't see. It's not the canvas I want. I'm going to add an A4 canvas, so just an A4 piece of paper, and this is what I'm going to draw my stencil onto. That is then going to get transferred onto an 8x8 canvas in a circle to print out for the hoop. So I'm going to add, insert the photo. I'm just going to move you over so you don't have to look at all my family photos. I'm sure you don't need to see any of those. And then this is the photograph of the bouquet that I was sent. So that's what I'm going to be tracing. So I've enlarged it to pretty much as big as I can. I'm going to add another layer. And then on the initial layer, I'm just going to turn down the opacity a little bit. So just that's how light or dark or transparent, should I say, the images. So I'm just going to do that a little bit so I can see when I'm drawing over the top. This is going to be a lot of work. Obviously I've got to highlight around every petal, every line, every bit. There's going to have to be a little bit of artistic license, because some of the, as you can see, these petals, that's not your screen, it's a blurred image. But this is what we're working with, so this is what we're going to do. I'm going to do each part in different colours. So the red, I'm going to go over in the reds, and just so I can differentiate between which bit of petal is belonging to which bit of flower. So, for example, I'm going to start up here and I'm going to do these in a pale blue. I will do each flower in a different layer as well. And basically, I'm going to start at the very top. I'm going to zoom all the way in. Make sure I've got a decent line. I've got a line that stays quite smooth. I need a very accurate line, rather than, this is the line that I use when I'm doing lettering and I want to get a decent smooth letter. Use this. So what I'm going to do is go back into my preferences Pressure and smoothing, and turn that stabilization off. It might mean I have slightly shakier lines, but hopefully I'm zooming in to the point where, if I just angle that, and then this petal goes up. So you see, even this one petal, I'm probably going to redo this because that's a bit wonky, that one. Even this one petal, there's just so much detail in here. And you see how I can't really work out what bit of what petal's that. This is part of, I believe, another flower coming out. The petal comes up. Yeah, this is going to take a long time, because when I zoom that right back out, that is like the smallest little bit of the top of the one of those. So it's going to be a lot of work. So that's what we're going to do next. Basically, I'm going to go around each part in its sort of corresponding colours. The stems I'm going to do in a green. These I'll do in a peach. I've drawn on the screen up there. This will be in a red. These will be in a deeper brown. The green, the yellow, the orange. So it's going to be a lot of work. But basically, what this should give me is then a framework with which to start stitching over. So I will start with, I can see there's a different colour here. What I used to do, I used to sketch it all in black, and then in a different colour, I would highlight different areas. I might choose a different colour again. I might actually choose a black colour to go over and just sort of patch out. Like here, you can see that this whole area, if you can see that, is a different colour to the rest. You can see that down here we've got a darker area. So when I stitch this, this is going to be in a very, very, very pale blue. This has got to have a greeny tone to it. But the contrast, I mean, when you look at it from far back without my sketch on the top, it's hard really to see a great difference in colour. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. That's kind of how it works. So I'm going to go around each individual petal and try and map out how I'm going to stitch. I will do different layers for the directions of stitching, and then I'm going to print these out. I'm going to print out one, obviously, is on the fabric that I'm going to stitch on. I'm hoping my fabric is going to fit in the printer. If not, I'm going to have to do a stick and stitch, which I don't really want to do. I'd rather do it on the fabric, but we'll see what happens. And then I'm going to print one out with the colour guide, print one out with the directional guide. You see, as you're stitching something like this, this is a circle shape. So my lines, back onto this one. My lines will go, stop it. Oh my God, why is it hidden? Stop it. There. Will stitch in this direction, and then these ones inside will be different to give the contrast. So that's kind of how these are going to get stitched, like that. Obviously that's going to be a deeper red, this is going to be a lighter red to show the direction of the flowers. It's going to look messy as hell, but it'll make sense. But I'm going to have to do different layers with the different mapped sort of instructions, if you like, to allow me to be able to stitch and know what on earth I'm doing. I'll say it, this is probably the most complicated one I've done yet, but hopefully it'll be fun to do. We'll see how it goes. All right, so I've gone through all the stencil, and if I take the photograph away underneath, you can see where I've outlined, with a little bit of artistic license, the majority of the bouquet, the majority of the shaping, some of the direction. I was going to go back over with the darker pen and put more detail into the stencil, but I think once I shrink this down, I think the detail's going to get a little bit lost, and it's going to sort of muddy the stencil, and I think I would be better putting the detail in with the different coloured threads by eye, rather than trying to follow a more detailed stencil than this, because it's quite detailed as it is. So if I put the photograph back on, I don't know how well you can kind of see over the top. Obviously, I'm removing the hands because I don't want just a pair of floating hands. I've kept the ribbon because I'm assuming that that's, you know, that could be quite important. But that's kind of, if you can see, that's where we're at with the stenciling. And we're going to see if we can turn that into the canvas. So my canvas is going to be an 8x8 ring. So what I want to do now is create a Procreate canvas, and we're going to have it 8x8. I don't know if you could see me do that, but basically we've changed that to 8 inches by 8 inches. Create that canvas. That should give us a nice square. And then what I'm going to do, I can't do it on camera because I can't see what I'm doing, but I'm going to draw a circle. And that will be the inner of that'll be sort of an 8x8 hoop shape. Oops, that's going to give us. So bear with. So I've drawn that and then used the editing tool to make sure that that is a circle. And I'm going to, select my shape and pull it quite near to the edge. I don't want it right up to the edge because I'm going to have the wooden hoop to account for. So I'm going to sort of see if I can centre that. There we are, both ways. And then I want to take a new layer. I've copied my stencil already. So I'm going to then, sorry, you didn't see what I did then. So I've added a new layer on my canvas. I'm going to go over here and then I'm going to paste my stencil inside. So it is going to be quite central. That's obviously the centre of the canvas. So if I take the select tool on, that's what we're going to end up with. So I can probably, if I combine my layer and my stencil now, I can reselect it and I can probably pull that a little bit larger because the actual pattern isn't going to touch the edges. Do you see what I mean? So that's going to be my canvas. That's probably about as big as I can go. I could maybe go a little bit more. Sort of centre that. And then I want to erase the actual image of the circle because I don't want that to show up on the printed stencil. So I'm just going to rub that circle out. And then what I'm left with is a centered, outlined stencil of the flowers that I'm going to sew that I know are going to perfectly fit my fabric. So I'm going to go and hope that my fabric is now big enough to stick in the printer. If not, this is going to have to be printed on a stick and stitch. So I will come back again. So we've hit a snag. So this is the linen that I'm going to sew onto. This is what I'm going to use. This is an 8x8 hoop. So obviously we need it big enough that we can then sort of pull it tight round the back once we've done and neaten the edges. I couldn't remember how big my paper was. This is basically what I often do is this is full size sticker paper, and I'll stick this onto the back of a piece of fabric so I can then run the fabric through the printer. Now, to do that, I would have to cut my fabric down quite considerably, but then I'm not going to have enough fabric left to go in the hoops. So, change of plan. I'm going to print my stencil onto a stick and stitch, which is then going to go onto my fabric. Now, when it comes to the custom orders, I will only use DMC thread. In my very messy craft room, I have this chest here, which is literally entirely DMC thread. Sometimes I will use other threads. I have boxes and boxes and boxes of threads and threads and threads and threads to make sure I've got a good colour range. My worry with using anything that isn't DMC is that all these lovely colours, when I stitch them and then I go to rinse my stick and stitch, is that the colour might run. That's what concerns me. So I will only use a DMC thread if I'm going to be rinsing it. I'll only use a DMC thread for a custom anyway, unless I'm absolutely forced and I do not have a colour that matches, then I will put the odd little bit of other thread through, because I'd rather a more accurate picture. But of course I can't do that if it's something that I'm going to then be running underwater and may potentially run, and the colour will run and it'll ruin the whole piece, and then that'll be a nightmare. So yeah, so we're going to be limited to DMC threads. Luckily DMC do a fantastic range of threads, so the colour matching is going to be the next thing I've got to do. I'm going to print this stencil out with and without the photograph on this layer and on the other layer. I've already got the bouquet itself as a reference printed on a piece of paper. I then need the stencil and the reference and a couple of copies of the stencil, because I have to make notes on what colour I use for what particular bit, and they can get quite messy. I know what I'm doing. Right, so I'm going to get the stick and stitch and print off the stencil. Anybody wondering, this is the stuff I use. Its brand is Sulky Sticky Fabri-Solvi, which is basically fabric backed onto paper so you can run it through a printer, and then it's dissolvable. So I'll print on this and then that will go on my fabric. So let's hope in my dusty old printer that that's printing out well.